So the section of this course is around getting better at diversity, equity, inclusion in our meeting design. And so the first section is around diversity and just how do we get the right voices around the table? How do we make sure we're doing the right types of invitations that make people feel welcome and that their voices are going to be heard? And so, yeah, if you could just share some tips on inviting voices to the table.
You know, I think one of the best things about inviting voices to the table is you have to start cultivating that relationship before it's time for them to actually come to the table. So again, a recruiting trick is that we say you can't recruit where you don't go, right? So if I'm recruiting from a school in an area that is really important that I connect with, but people never see me there or see my presence there or see my brand there, then the odds of them really thinking that I want them and possibly looking at my opportunity are slim to none, right? And I'll give you another example. I'm working on a youth event where we're gonna give them career opportunities. And in the event, we were so focused on the actual design of the event and what they were gonna be doing and giving them giveaways. And some genius in that conversation pointed out, well, can you just ask the companies that want to hire them to come here? Light bulb went on, right? And so I would definitely say when you are wanting diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's really, really important that you start cultivating that relationship in advance prior to that. So if we are deciding now, and I understand you always have to start somewhere, so I definitely understanding that, but one of the things that helps so much with starting is building your relationship and really kind of walking in who you decide you want to be as a company, especially when it comes to your DEI initiative. So that would be tip number one, definitely, is to decide on, make sure that if you're recruiting for somewhere, you're inviting someone to the table, make sure you kind of built a door to let them in. I guess that's the best way to, to go ahead and put that. And another thing I like to say too, and we talked about this in the recent training I was in, is sometimes we invite people to the table and we feel like that invitation is enough, and sometimes it's not, right? So what is the environment that we're creating that's going to make them feel really included in the conversation and really welcome in that conversation? Because an invitation doesn't equate to welcome, right? And sometimes we've been taught that, well, I invited them and I told them they can come. Well, historically, if that's not an avenue that they've had access to, it's probably going to take a little more than inviting them and telling them that they can come. So that's where your network is great. You know, maybe if there's particular people that you want to be a part of, say, a board or something like that, then maybe you have kind of a friend of a friend and make some introductions. And again, that pre-engagement piece is vital. It's critical for people to speak at the table.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard that so many times around board tables, right?
Yes.
Well, our diversity plan was to invite diverse voices to come, and they didn't show up. You know.
Yes, yes. The example I gave.
Relationship.
Yeah,
No sense
exactly.
Be really welcomed when you get here.
Exactly. So, the example I gave Stacy, that she probably it's funny to me because I was working with an organization one time, and they designed a youth program, and then no kids came, and so I said, well, where are you advertising? And they're like, the church bulletin. So I'm 15, I'm probably not reading the print church bulletin every week, right?
Right.
So even understanding that, right? Understanding that that invitation has to probably come outside of your normal scope of what you would do. Mm-hmm. It takes more of an effort to do that, but it's definitely the right thing to do. You definitely want those inclusive voices because of that. You want those because we all have our own limits of what we can see based off our experiences. Just like that, like if there was someone else that had been sitting at that table, they would have said, hey, kids, you need to get on TikTok or something of that nature. Kids aren't reading a print church bulletin. Like, right. It's been some years. So definitely. So I just think it's super important that you go where you want to recruit. You're familiar with those places that you really want to connect with. You build those relationships in advance. You can't wait until it's, oh, I have a board opening. And so now that I have a board opening, I'm going to ask a BIPOC person to sit on there. Well, that relationship should start before that. And again, maybe your organization hasn't been at that place in their journey, and that's okay. But once you make the decision that that's who you want to be, then you start cultivating those relationships right away.
I mean, if you were thinking about the economic inclusion network, right? Like for someone who has never been there, but you want, voices there, what's ways that you're thinking about inviting people that is going to be more effective at getting them to show up?
I think, for example, that's a good example. So like with that, the Economic Inclusion Initiative, I would have to say, because I think there are things that people care about that we talk about there, that when you hear the terminology economic inclusion, that doesn't resonate with people. And so sometimes even speaking in layman's terms, because again, like I understand why some of the DEI work, we use the economic inclusion term. But if I work higher ed or something of that nature, that might not be something that resonated with me, right? So again, thinking about your messaging, thinking about how you verbalize it. If you know enough about who you're trying to attract, which you should, because that's why you want to attract them, then what do they care about? Like, what are the things that your organization or your mission are working on that would attract someone to come work for you? Like, for example, when I joined the House of Hope board, one of my friends invited me on because she knows I'm passionate about women's empowerment things.
Right.
So that's where she led off with. She led off with, this is some of the work that we do. This is some of the initiatives that we've done. These are the women that we've helped. Things that, again, marketing, because it works, right? So you kind of build your participant. You don't really leave them space to say no, so to speak, because if you know what they're into, like a person that knows anything about joy, they would have known, oh yeah, she's going to be all over that. Even if she doesn't have time, she's going to figure out how to make time for that, right? And so again, goes back to building that relationship in advance, so you know enough about that person so that when you extend that invitation, you're actually speaking to what's important to them and what matters to them. And again, you're asking them to join your board because there should be something that is in alignment. You're not just looking for a brown face or a woman or a person with a disability. You're actually, because there's some synergy between who that person is and the function of your board. And so you want to pull off that. So.
Right. Yeah, we talked about in a blog earlier this month that you can't invite someone into the board to play the role of BIPOC person unless you're inviting all the white people in the room to just play the role of white person.
Yes, exactly. exactly. And that's an alienating thing, right? If you don't know enough about me to know why you want me here, then that can do the exact opposite of your goal, right? Like that can make a person feel like this organization isn't really serious about equity on their board. They just want me there because I'm a woman or because I'm Black or whatever have you. But again, if we're doing the research and we're like, well, no, she's passionate about women's empowerment, or Jordan's passionate about feeding America. And so I know these things. So he's likely going to want to serve on this board because while he's doing this other role right now, this could be one of his outlets. And, I can shape it like that to him that, hey, I know this is what you like to do. So because I know this is what you like to do, I think you'd be amazing in this board. And why don't you join us and learn a little bit more? So that's when we do board recruitment, we typically take it from there. So
that's great. So these are the things I heard you say. You have to cultivate a relationship before you make the invitation.
Definitely.
You can't feel like the invitation is enough. You can't just put the invitation out into the world and hope that it comes back. You have to recognize where you're putting the invitation, and is it in a place that is actually recognizable or accessible to the people you're trying to invite. You might want to think about the terminology that you're using just to make sure that it's not kind of disorienting or feels like I'm not going to be welcomed or know what I'm talking about, or I'm going to be left out of the conversation. And then finally, to be clear on the role that someone's being asked to be a part of when you're inviting them, and that it can't just be about their diverse nature, whether it's a woman, a BIPOC person. It has to be about their passion, their experience, their knowledge that they're bringing to the table when they're
Exactly. You make me sound very intelligent. Thank you.
Well, you are. Those things you said.
What he said.
Well, thanks so much. This was really helpful. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jordan. And next time I won't be so dressed up.